Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Dr. Spotfire session. I'm your host, Boris, and today I have with me Daniel Pimentel, who is a product manager in Spotfire. Daniel, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Yeah. Hello. Excited to be here today. I guess I'll give a little bit of background. So I'm one of our product managers at Spotfire, and I specifically focus on all things data connectivity and data access related. So really excited to talk about some best practices and tips and tricks.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And as you might have understood from Daniel's presentation, we're going to be talking about data connectors in Spotfire. Spotfire enables powerful data connectivity through multiple connection methods, with Spotfire data connectors being central feature for efficient data access. So we'll see today how data connectors provide streamlined access to various data sources while maintaining security and performance. We're going to talk about different topics, frameworks, advantages, when to use specific connectors and types, performance considerations, security implementation, and so on. So before we kick off with the topic, let's just have a couple of slides about Dr. Spotfire channel. So it's a program designed to help new and advanced Spotfire users. The program is hosted by Spotfire experts in data science and customer success. The office hours are monthly sessions, and they're live the first Tuesday of every month, streaming live in YouTube and LinkedIn. So how does Dr. Spotfire work and why you should care? Just very briefly, Dr. Spotfire is a program aimed to help all of you, as I already mentioned. It consists of sessions like this and small quick tip videos that you can find in our YouTube channel. All those ideas that we come up with for the sessions are driven by our community through the ideas portal, social media, and so on, resulting in the Spotfire product evolving with new visualizations, data functions, apps, accelerators, and so on. Right. This time I promise, before we start with the main topic, I've got two quick and exciting announcements. Last month, we had our Spotfire Energy Forum in Houston, Texas. It was an opportunity to learn about the latest and greatest about Spotfire and to hear some powerful talks from customers and partners. We also had a Spotfire Hackathon, so congratulations to our winners. For more information about the hackathon and the submissions, I will share a link in the comments. So I encourage you to check the hackathon if you want to showcase or challenge your Spotfire skills. You can still participate and submit your work. So please check it out. Keep an eye on the comments for the link. All right, let's kick off the presentation with our motto: learning is often fueled by questions. Questions spark curiosity, encourage exploration, and lead to deeper understanding of the subject. So learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. Feel free to ask us any questions, keep them coming, and we'll try to answer as much as possible. A quick confidentiality disclaimer, and let's get started. I will give the stage to Daniel. And I'm actually going to swap the screens so he can show us the presentation. That's it.
Cool. Yeah, I think I was on the same slide as you. So great. Let's go ahead and kick off. I actually don't have like an agenda slide or anything too formal, but essentially I want to start with a broad overview of what connectivity looks like within Spotfire, and then dive into some of the different methods that exist for data access, and talk a little bit about what are the relative benefits of each method available, as well as go into some detail in terms of the different data loading types of ways that you can interact with your data. So with that, let's go ahead and just dive right in. I like to think of connectivity at Spotfire as a portfolio, right? So Spotfire, broadly speaking, is designed to prep, explore, and analyze data at scale, at rest, or in motion across multiple sources. I like to think of Spotfire as this, very versatile, multi-purpose tool with a powerful data engine that doesn't shy away from, any type of data or data sizes. So it's very, very, very powerful, solution. And then in particular, there are connectors, which we'll go into detail as far as exactly what that means. There's information services. Those are sort of the two key data access solutions within the core Spotfire product. And then we also have some complementary solutions in our data virtualization offering and also our data streams offering. So data virtualization is pretty much exactly what it sounds like in terms of the capability. And data streams is how we access and process real-time data to make it easily consumable in Spotfire. So I will primarily focus on the first two boxes that you see there. And then if we have time, I'll do maybe a quick primer on the other two, although they probably could deserve full sessions dedicated to those. And of course, Boris, if anything comes to mind, please do stop me, and we can keep it a lively discussion here. So with that, like I mentioned, there are two primary means of data access in Spotfire. Connectors provide a client-side access to data, and it supports accessing data via in-memory, on-demand, or in database. I have a slide later on where I can go into more detail on those different data loading methods and what purposes they each serve. Then we have information services, which is a server-side method for accessing and managing any JDBC compliant data source. So information services is a more sort of general purpose tool to access a broader range of data sources. And the fact that it's server-side also has some implications that we'll dive into on the following slides. And then lastly, Spotfire very much is a platform. So we do have an SDK that enables development of custom data sources. So you can import data from virtually any external source. And, this could be databases and warehouses, any kind of application you might be using, or also different types of file formats that might not be supported out of the box. And then on this slide, we have a handful of logos. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but just maybe a quick overview of some of the key sources we support. So with that, I want to dive into connectors specifically. So as a high-level overview, I like to talk about connectors as something that is tailor-made for a specific data source. And as a product of that, it provides access to unique features and functions of that data source. And it allows users direct access to the tables and columns in that underlying source without needing to model the data schema ahead of time. So you're basically presented with all the tables available at that source, and then you can essentially choose exactly which tables you then want to bring into Spotfire. And the interface by which you access data and kind of navigate the different tables at your disposal is called views in connection. So that's sort of the front end for how you define the actual query. And so as a high level summary, you can think of connectors as decentralized data access. So it's individual users going out into the data source, browsing it, identifying what data they need, and then consuming and analyzing that data in Spotfire. And so to go into a little bit more detail on connectors, the database driver is installed and managed on the client level. So on one of the earlier slides, there was a big distinction, right, between connectors being client side versus information services being server side. And so this is one of the key implications, right? Every client that wants to connect to a specific or needs to connect to a specific data source needs to make sure that they have the appropriate drivers installed. Now, we do have a handful of data sources where the driver is included out of the box, and you can kind of refer to our documentation for those details. But generally speaking, you'll have to go and then install the driver. Also, there's, like I mentioned earlier, support for source-specific functions and transformations. So there's some unique capabilities that you want to leverage from a specific data source. Connectors are generally the most capable in that regard. And then since it's, the actual client, so the analyst, for example, that's establishing a direct connection with the data source, users do need to have access to credentials as well. That's another key differentiation from information services. And then connectors generally inherit permissions from the data source, user, or service account that you are using to authenticate with. And then lastly, like I mentioned, it is compatible with in-memory, on-demand, and in database data. In database being that you're keeping the data external.
Maybe here, Daniel, just because we have a wide range of users really with Spotfire, and we have a lot of users who prefer information services. They use them regularly. And maybe they just know vaguely about data connectors. Can you explain if there are any special knowledge in order to use data connectors? Anything in particular, maybe? And obviously, this is a vague question because there are tons of native connectors again. But is there something that our users should know?
Yeah. So off the top of my head, I think some of the key things are that, connectors are intended to provide a more intimate experience with your data, right? So you have access to all the tables that you are allowed to access, right, from that underlying source based on your permission settings and whatnot from your administrators. And so it's very well suited to like ad hoc analysis, right? You select a few tables, you can choose to leave the data externally, for example. So one of the key benefits of connectors being purpose-built for a specific data source is that we can support unique transformations and functions that those data sources have available. And then with that, we can also keep the data external, right? And information services being sort of a more general purpose access point does not have those capabilities, for example. So if you have users that are, very comfortable working with the data intimately, transforming the data, adding different columns, rows, whatever it may be, and in particular wanting to do this on the fly, right? So as they are learning more about the data through the analysis, they then also want to go and change maybe some of the data preparation steps or clean the data and enrich it through their analysis. Then connectors would be sort of the best suited approach for that. I think the one thing maybe, if I could get one thing across today, is I think most organizations of kind of any meaningful size probably have use cases for both connectors and information services, right? So depending on how you want to access data and the types of features that those users need, and then their comfort in working intimately with that data, then you probably have, some users that want to access data via connectors versus others that would be better suited with information links. And I'll dive into, I guess, in a couple of slides, information services specifically, which again also has its own relative benefits. Cool. So that dovetails nicely to some of the connector benefits. Again, it's a direct and very flexible access to the data sources. It provides kind of the maximum degree of query flexibility for your analysis, and you, as a user, you sort of have full control over the connection details and how you're defining specific relationships and joins and things like that with the data. So like I mentioned earlier, it's very much optimized for this experience of ad hoc querying, analysis, and explorations, where you're kind of going back and forth with the data in a very hands-on way. With that being said, there's still an emphasis in reuse, right? So when you establish, when you create an analysis or an application and you want to share that out, you can then also actually embed the connection within the analysis, and then in that way make it easily reusable and accessible for other users as well. Another point is that although it is intended to be, it is a client-side connection that you're establishing, there are options to then centralize the authentication credentials within the Spotfire server. So there are some features around kind of centralized management of the connections themselves and the credentials. However, as we'll see in the next couple of slides, information services, being entirely server side, is almost completely designed around sort of the central management of connectors, which is one of the driving factors for these having very distinct use cases, if you will. Cool. So with that, let me jump into information services. So again, it enables you to connect to any JDBC compliant database. It is very much intended to be a generalizable tool. So you access or you define data sources through data source templates. So essentially you can configure access to any database or data source that provides a JDBC driver. So in that way, it's much more extensible than connectors, which again are purpose-built for a specific source. And users can access information links. So information links are essentially the predefined queries that are then saved as something that's consumable within the library that you can easily bring into your analysis to access that data. And so users can access those information links without needing to install drivers or manage any database credentials themselves. So again, those are kind of some of the key differentiators with connectors, since all the drivers and everything is sort of front loaded on the server side. It's a little bit, I would say, maybe better suited for IT administrators that want to have more control over which users have access to specific capabilities or data. And so because of that, the maybe high level summary is information services is better suited for centralized data federation, right? So you're doing all the definition of the query, of the data model, all your joins and all of that. You're doing it within the information designer front-end experience. And then you're then pushing out those information links as these consumable, reusable, predefined queries. So it's very easy to federate data, and it's very easy to control who has access to that data. And so, like I mentioned, the database driver itself is installed and managed on the server. Information designer is the front end interface. So the way that you interact and access the data itself is also different, where connectors use views and connection. And then one key difference is that because information services is oriented toward federated data access, it has these concepts that are very well suited toward reuse. So you at first define a data source itself in information services, and then from there you can select which tables you want to work with specifically, and from those tables you create elements. And so the significance of that is that the elements, whether they're columns or filters, for example, is that these are reusable components that you can then use as your building blocks for the query itself, which is an information link. And so that's another key point of differentiation, is that it has these clever sort of ways of abstracting certain data source concepts into components that can then be reused across multiple analyses or multiple queries. Whereas connectors, you're very much accessing the table itself and making decisions on the table and maybe, you know, selecting columns and things like that. But it's not, it doesn't have these abstraction concepts that make it easy to then reuse the connection that or the specific you know, data set and data modeling that you've done. And so that, I would say, from kind of an interface or sort of conceptual level, that's probably one of the biggest differentiators, and what makes information services so well suited for providing data access to others. Although, of course, if you're savvy, you know, you can definitely use information services as well to create your information links on the fly. And another sort of key benefit for, you know, if you are kind of more of an administrator persona, is you can also specify permissions at the folder level within information services. So you also do have means of implementing, you know, column level security policies and stuff like that, and have a little bit tighter control over who has access to creating information links, who has access to specific elements or data sources. So the level of kind of security and governance provided is also richer with information services. And then contrary to connectors, is it's only compatible with in-memory and on-demand data. So you cannot leave data external.
I think that's one of your next topics that I was planning also to ask you questions, but I'm going to give you some time before I go with it, because I think there's the use cases very much depend on how you want to load your data, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the key differences. And then, yeah, it's ultimately how you are trying, you know, how your users typically consume the data, how often they're actually trying to change the underlying query as well, are kind of some of the key factors to consider. So I'll quickly do a recap on some of the benefits. But again, information services all revolves around defining information links, which are essentially just centrally managed reusable queries that are typically used across a wider set of analyses. The data governance and security controls are also quite a bit more robust. And I don't say that as a negative for connectors. It's just that I would say connectors maybe are sort of focused on that power user that is you know, constantly working and wrangling with the data as they analyze the data, whereas information links are more oriented toward just consuming the data and not necessarily you know, and if you want to make edits, you might need to actually change some of the data modeling that was done sort of upstream of the creation of the information link. But one of the other sort of key benefits is that the query has already been defined for you, right? So you don't necessarily need to have SQL knowledge or familiarity with the database, the table relations in a very intimate way. All of that's kind of been taken care of for you. And then with these being predefined queries and you having, a nice folder hierarchy and these different permission settings, is that you also can then enforce more consistent data definitions across the organization. So these are very, very, I think, well suited for a lot of like enterprise-wide type reporting use cases, or anytime you have data that's accessed in a very frequent way, then you can sort of create an information link that's been optimized for that type of data access, versus having a lot of distinct connections that are created with connectors to access essentially, the same data in a frequent way as well. So I do want to do some time on data loading methods as well, since that's kind of one of the key differentiators we've called out. But we have the in-memory engine, which is essentially importing data into Spotfire's proprietary data engine. So you can sort of think of that as when you make a selection of a table before any actual sort of transformations and additional or functions, computations are executed. The data, the full table is, or with the selected columns and whatnot, and any kind of selections you make up front, that data is brought into Spotfire's engine, and then it's Spotfire's own data engine that is actually running computations, or as you're adding calculated columns and things like that. All of that is being done on Spotfire's own engine. And then you have in-database processing, which is essentially offloading the execution of queries to the external database engine. Now, it does have some feature limitations, right? So it doesn't necessarily have support for all of the same transformations and computations that Spotfire's proprietary data engine has, but you do have access to some transformations that are maybe supported by that external database engine. And so one of the key differences here is that, let's say you're visualizing some data, and so you have like a table that displays some, let's say, sums of data in a bar chart or something like that. So what's happening is all the actual queries being sent off, it's being executed, and then all you're getting is the actual aggregated data, right? So you didn't load all of the full table into Spotfire's data engine. All you're getting is the result set. And then if you apply additional filtering to that same bar chart, that would then cause another query to then run and execute on that external engine again and bring back the result set, right? So you're working with what actually comes into memory is typically a pretty limited and smaller data set. So it's great when you want to be working with very large data volumes that maybe don't fit into Spotfire in memory, or that it might take a long time to load. But you want to be able to sort of visualize different views and aggregations of those large data sets. And so this provides a lot of flexibility in how you work and visualize data on Spotfire. And then lastly would be data on demand. And so this is all focused around just loading partial amounts of data in memory based on specific conditions or user interactions, such as markings. And I would say markings is probably the kind of most common way you see data on demand being used. You can think of it as like a parameterized query, where essentially you're on the fly, you're specifying kind of where clause conditions. So You often see it again where maybe preload or loading all your data in memory right off the bat might be a bit cumbersome, or you likely don't need all that data up front. So you might have like a table where you have some metadata, and then you can select a handful of rows from that table, and then that then triggers the actual those specific selections, that full data set to then be brought into your analysis in memory. So that's kind of a high-level overview of some of the methods that are supported.
Yeah, quite extensive. Yeah, I had a question, but you answered it already on that. So for a specific use case in database processing, and you pointed out very well with the size of the data. So I think that's quite helpful also for a lot of our audience considering different data loading methods. I'm just a little bit cautious of time.
Yeah.
So just if you want for us to wrap it up with more of a conclusion around data connectors, and then we're going to provide our audience with a couple of articles and links to read further and documentation.
Sounds good. Let me do a very quick speed run on just a couple of concepts. So on the extensibility side, I mentioned Spotfire has a very powerful SDK, so you can define custom data sources that allow you to access data from new systems, applications, databases, or file formats, and then they are sort of fully searchable and exposed in the UI as if they were native data sources, which is a nice benefit. And then I also want to make sure that we as well develop some data source extensions as community connectors. And so these are available to download from our community exchange. And it's an awesome way of extending what Spotfire can do in terms of data access out of the box. And one of the actual benefits is that because they are versioned independently of the product, we can deliver new features and upgrades in a bit more of a dynamic way. So oftentimes the connectors that make their way into the product as native features begin as community developments where we can iterate quickly with a customer, get quick input, make sure it's meeting all the requirements, and then work to harden it into a fully featured native connector. So that's another kind of great feature of the Spotfire platform. And then awesome. Yeah. So as a quick conclusion, like we covered today, Spotfire provides various methods to access data from virtually any data source. And the optimal approach ultimately comes down to your use case, and you should consider a variety of factors. This isn't a comprehensive list, but the frequency of accessing the same data set, right? So whether you're doing ad hoc analysis and trying to answer a question where maybe you don't have a very clear answer of where that data lives, what type of data you might need, and what you might uncover as you're going with your analysis, versus if you already know what data you want to display and exactly what data you need for like a reporting type of use case, then you're probably better suited with an information link. And anytime you're accessing the same data set frequently, it's ideal if you can avoid sort of establishing, a bunch of client-side connections to basically run the exact same query, right? And things like this also become more pertinent if you're working within a cloud-based system, for example, where there's data egress costs involved. Then you should also factor in a user's proficiency with the data source schema, how comfortable they feel with how database tables are structured, what data is contained in specific tables. And so if someone is highly familiar and they want to work with those tables intimately and define relations and joins and add columns and so on, then connectors are very well suited for that. And the next point basically touches on the same, whether you're combining data sets on the fly and sort of defining, transformations and other data preparation steps and operations. Support for in-database and leaving the data external is something unique to connectors. And I think for the foreseeable future, that will continue to be the case. So if you do have large data volumes that you're working with, or you want that degree of flexibility as far as when data actually comes in memory, connectors are very well suited for that. And then things like governance and security requirements. So if you have users that again are familiar with the data source and you already govern all your data access controls and whatnot from the data source, and having individual users authenticate using something like OAuth and different single sign-on methods, then connectors are great. If you would like to manage that all on the Spotfire side and have pretty tight governance policies and stuff like that, where you control who accesses what data sources or specific columns, then information services provides a lot of great methods for governing who has access to specific data within your Spotfire deployment. So those are some of the considerations. They're not all of them, but like I mentioned earlier, I think the key takeaway should be that which solution you use should be very much oriented toward the specific type of use case or analysis that you're trying to complete. And even if you have multiple users working within the same data source, there's a strong possibility that some would be better served by connectors, whereas others might be well suited to just consume data via information links. But with that, Boris, I went way over time, so I'll
no worries at all. It's a very big topic. It's and we went ballistic on the theory here, which is obviously super important. So we should have considered a part 2 of this session, which we might do and continue discussing it further, because it's very interesting and very hot topic right now.
Of course.
I think so. But thank you very much. I couldn't say it better myself. This was a very, very good conclusion. I'm just going to wrap up our session for today. Don't forget to subscribe for past sessions and for the future sessions. This is our YouTube channel. Also, don't hesitate to contact us if you want to share your work, your questions, and so on. And I will see you in the next Dr. Spotfire office hours. Thank you again, Daniel, for this super extensive session.
Yeah. And quick plug for the data caching session that you did.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that's a very complementary topic as well to sort of the data connectivity and data access theme.
Absolutely. And we might see you soon for part 2 of data connectors.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks a ton, Boris.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.